When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
This is Cindy Burnett. Welcome to my award-winning podcast, Thoughts from a Page, a member of the Evergreen Podcasts Network. On this show, I chat with authors whose books I have enjoyed about their new releases, and others in the book world about the books that they have loved. With so many books coming out weekly, it can be hard to decide what to read, so I find the best ones and share them with you. Do you love to be in the know about upcoming books? Kelly Hooker of Kelly Hook Reads Books, and I do too. We couldn't find a comprehensive list of titles all in one place, so we made one ourselves, and now we're sharing it with you. Our third literary lookbook is a list of a whopping 584 titles releasing from January to May 2025, curated for our communities. The link to buy it is in my show notes. Today, Kelly Hooker returns to chat with me about our favorite books of July through September of 2024. Kelly is an avid reader, reviewer, and bookstagrammer. She works very part-time as a speech pathologist in Michigan and has 3 toddler boys. As a result, she firmly believes that nap time is for novels. She is an audiobook enthusiast and loves hosting her signature chapters and chats. She creates seasonal reading guides to help readers pick up the right book at the right time. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
This holiday season, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond the moment they open it. There's the sound of them unboxing super soft Lululemon loungewear. And then there's the sound of them slipping into deep recovery mode after every workout. With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. Open the moment. Shop now at lululemon.com.
Welcome, Kelly. How are you today?
I am doing well. Cindy, how are you?
I'm doing well as well, and I'm excited that you're here for us to talk about our favorite books of July through September.
Yes, this was a fun crop of books to chat about.
It really was. I initially thought I wasn't going to have that many, but when I sat down and really poured over everything, I ended up with 12, which I felt was really good.
Yes, I told you before I even picked up my books, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to have enough. And then I'm like, oh, I actually do. There are plenty of great books that came out in this time period. It's just going back and finding them, and they're there.
Exactly. And we don't do October through December for 2 reasons. One, because there's not a lot that we read that comes out in that window, but also because we do our favorites of the year. And so it would seem a little duplicative to try to be doing both. So we do have 2 books that are October releases, one that we share and one that is one of mine. So we are kind of going into October just a little bit.
Yeah, just to dabble.
Exactly. Well, how is Chapters and Chats going? What do y'all have coming up soon?
We're so excited for November 21st. We're hosting Anna Johnston, the author of The Borrowed Life of Frederick, Fife. We love hosting debut authors. They're just so fantastic and so delightful. And it's great to help get their books out into the world and let people know about them. And then in December, we're hosting Ava Dellaira, the author of Exposure, which I think is the ultimate book club pick. And I will talk a little bit about that later. And then in January, we are hosting Dan Slepian, the author of the Sing Sing Files. And we are so excited because he is also bringing along JJ, who is a man that was wrongfully convicted, that Dan talks about his case in his nonfiction book. So we're so excited for the lineup that we have right now.
You should be. Those all sound fantastic. And the Sing Sing Files would be a great nonfiction November read.
Yes, absolutely. Pick that one up.
Exactly. Well, in our literary lookbook, it's made its way out into the world. It's been really fun to see people sharing about it and listen to their feedback and everything.
It has. This literary lookbook is our third lookbook. It just came out at the end of October. It covers titles January through May of 2025. And this lookbook really escalated because we have 500 titles, which is significantly higher than we've had in the past. And we felt that putting it together.
We did feel that. I kept saying to you, this is taking so much longer than last time. And I think we realized that the difference in 584 and 392 is vastly different.
Vastly different. But we ended up with a really fantastic and very comprehensive and sort of exhaustive, we usually say, but not exhaustive, but this is almost exhaustive resource for readers with upcoming books. So it's been a joy to have it out in the world, and it feels so fun to deliver such a big project.
I agree. And it's really helping me because you and I are both working on our winter reading guides right now. And it allows me to go in and be like, okay, what's coming in January? I might need another book for that month, or I need a mystery. Let me go through and find that. So it's been very helpful.
Yes. And as we put it together, just poring over all of these books and reading all of the descriptions, it helps us really hone in on what we want to prioritize and read for our reading guides as well.
I agree.
If you're interested in the lookbook, it's available for $13, and you can find it via the links in both of our bios on Instagram.
And I'll put it in the show notes for this show as well.
Perfect.
So 12 books for July through early October. And I'm so excited to talk about them. So we had 3 that overlapped. So you're going to cover 2 of those, and I'm going to cover 1. And then we'll talk about the others that make our individual lists.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right, why don't we dive in?
The first book that Cindy and I both loved is We Solve Murders by Richard Osman, and it came out September 17th. We Solve Murders is the first book in a fresh series by Richard Osman, author of the beloved Thursday Murder Club series. These characters simply shine in this globe-trotting adventure. Our detective duo is an unlikely combination. We have a woman and her father-in-law, and they team up as a murder-solving duo to take on a quippy villain with an affinity for ChatGPT. Here's a note about the audiobook. I had a hard time keeping track of the characters because the names felt a bit generic, and I thought there were quite a few characters, but the narrator was lovely. And once I began to take some character notes, I had my bearings. But I do think I would have benefited from having a physical copy in front of me. I still really liked the story, and I'm excited to get in on this series at the ground level, and will look forward to seeing what this zany cast of characters is up to next.
So I have to say, when I first heard he was writing another series, I was really disappointed because I love the Thursday Murder Club. So I first picked it up and I was like, and I put it down. But then I kept seeing rave reviews, so I picked it up again and I loved it. So I really think my initial ambivalence was my annoyance that it wasn't the Thursday Murder Club. Because when I went into it fresh thinking it's okay, he can write another series, I thought it was really well done. So fun, so clever, lots of humor, just like the Thursday Murder Club. And I'll be so curious to see how he toggles between the 2 series, because in his author's note, he says he has not left the Thursday Murder Club for good, but also that this is a new series. So I can't wait to see how all that unfolds.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see as well.
But I thought this one was outstanding.
Me too.
And that's We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. Okay, the second book that we both liked was The Wedding People by Allison S. Pack, and it came out July 30th. This is one of my favorite reads of 2024. It checked all the boxes for me. There is so much humor, also a lot of depth, touching on a wide array of timely issues, a great setting, and authentic and well-crafted characters. All the way around, it was a big win. I also like that it appeals to a wide range of ages. My 23-year-old read it and loved it and has been constantly asking me for more books like The Wedding People. And it's been hard to find recommendations that meet her request. I wish there were more stories like this. So Phoebe Stone shows up at a hotel and mistakenly gets swept up into wedding festivities right when she is at her lowest. She starts her day thinking that it will be the last day of her life, and instead she starts down a totally different path with the help of an unexpected group of people. In this character-driven and touching tale, Espak tackles so many issues that people deal with today: marriage, infidelity, infertility, loneliness, death, friendship, and disappointment. While these issues can be heavy, the book is so engaging, heartwarming, and hilarious. and it often went in directions that I was not expecting at all. I loved everything about it. The characters, the plot, the intergenerational friendship, and the book's resolution.
I agree. I think this was so different than I expected. I went into it really blind, but really in the best way. I think the author broaches heavy topics like loneliness, grief, and depression, but she handles them with a really light and sensitive touch. I'm with you that I think there's so much to adore about this story, especially if you can't get enough of the found family trope. I think it was the perfect summer read because it struck a great balance between humor and heart. The characters were really memorable, and I just enjoyed the direction that each of their characters was taken. I'll be eager to read what the author writes next.
I agree. I'm already looking forward to that. But yes, I just felt it definitely checked all the boxes, like I said before, and there aren't that many stories like that, so I was happy to read it. And that's The Wedding People by Allison Espak.
Okay, next is The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern by Linda Cohen-Loigman, and this is one of our October reads. It came out October 8th. Just when I think that I don't enjoy magical realism, Linda Cohen-Loigman comes along with yet another one of her charming stories, and I get completely lost in it. This story has just a touch of magic, like a tiny little tincture, if you will, but it's otherwise firmly rooted in a typical Floridian senior community. We meet pharmacist Augusta Stern after her recent retirement at the ripe age of 80, when she reconnects with the man who left her brokenhearted 60 years ago. Told in past and present timelines, we witness the separate directions their lives took them and the ways fate brought them back together. Themes of found family, new beginnings, and a long-awaited second chance romance really made my heart swell and reminded me that it's never too late for a new beginning. What did you think about this one?
I adored this book. I just thought it was delightful, and I loved your little tincture play on words there a minute ago. I thought all of the pharmacy aspects of the story in the 1920s was so interesting. I kept having to Google things and look them up and learn more. And interesting how pharmacists played such a different role in society than they do today.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of those books that is really sticking with me this year that follows octogenarians or people in their sunset years of life. It's really resonating with me this year.
I agree. And there seem to be more and more of these type of stories. And the other thing that's great is this book is everywhere. She won the Mary Calvi October Book Club pick. She was in People magazine. So this book is definitely resonating with people.
It is. It's a big deal.
So those are the three that we overlapped on. Why don't we start by diving into your first one that you loved yourself?
Okay, we're heading back to July. It's The Same Bright Stars by Ethan Joella. It came out July 2nd. Whenever I think of an Ethan Joella book, I think of a big hug from a friend. He just has a way of highlighting what makes us all human, the missteps and the messiness and the beauty of coming together. In this story, we meet Jack Schmidt, and he's in the middle of his lackluster life running Schmidt's, a restaurant that's been in his family for generations. While the off-season in Rehoboth Beach lacks tourists, it is bustling with tension from the locals. Jack has loved and lost, and he begins to wonder if selling Schmidt's to a big corporation will allow him to find more meaning and adventure in life. As with his previous novels, Joella's themes of finding hope through connection and community really shine through. Like, that is his strong suit. We hosted Ethan for chapters and chats, and he is our first repeat author. We just think he is such a delight, and he is amazing with readers. He really appreciates readers and is just such a warm-hearted person, and that comes through in his writing. And that was The Same Bright Stars by Ethan Joella.
He is such a darling and favorite on Instagram, I think.
He sure is, yes. He's so engaged with his readers.
Absolutely. So my first book is The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood, and it came out July 2nd. The premise of this one appealed to me, and I was so glad that I read it. The cover also caught my eye. I often say I really don't like all of the illustrated people on romance covers. They make me think of YA. So I was really glad that this one went in a different direction. There's so much to love in this one. The humor, something that's obviously resonating with me. We keep mentioning it. The characters, including the spectacular secondary ones, all of the romance tropes, and book shout-outs, and the creative storyline itself. Delphi dies choking on a microwavable burger while wondering if it's real beef. She wakes up in the afterlife where she meets the man of her dreams. But his eternal life is an accident, and off he goes back to Earth. Delphi is offered a deal to return to Earth and find this handsome, mysterious stranger. But in a city of millions, can she find him before it's too late? As she sets out to find the man, she ends up embarking on a journey of really getting to know herself better. In the process of looking for what she considers to be the love of her life, she actually learns to live, she falls in love, and she makes peace with her past. And while I thought I knew where the book was going, I didn't at all, which is always a huge positive for me. Christy and I chatted for the podcast, and it is one of my favorite recent interviews. She's absolutely delightful and so funny. I'm really excited to see what she comes up with next, and that is The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood.
This is great. I have this book, and when I met with Ivana in Chicago this summer, my friend and co-host of Chapters and Chats, she was just in the mood for something light. She didn't really resonate with any of the books that she brought, and I was like, here, try this one. And she just devoured it. So I definitely want to read this one as well.
It's really cute and clever and very unique in a good way.
I love that. Next for me is Lenny Marks Gets Away with Murder. This came out July 9th. Emma Gray, the author of The Last Love Note and Pictures of You, recommended this book to me during our Chapters and Chats event when I asked her of other Australian authors that I should be on the lookout for. This book was compared to Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, which so many books are, but this is actually the closest comp that I have found to that book. So let's talk about Lenny. Lenny Marks lives a regimented life with her career as a teacher, watching her friends' reruns and basking in her simple life at home. Her world is turned upside down with her stepfather's release from prison, and dark secrets from her past emerge. Debut Australian author Kerryn Mayne highlights the people that buoy us when life becomes completely disorienting. I loved the thoughtful neurodiversity representation and how she highlighted the importance of living in community. Please check trigger warnings. There is one scene of child abuse that is depicted on the page, and it may not be a good fit for sensitive readers. Overall, I found this to be a very hopeful story and a delight. That was Lenny Marks Gets Away with Murder by Kerryn Mayne.
This is another one that I feel like I've seen a lot on Bookstagram. People are really liking it.
They are. It's great.
My next book is May the Wolf Die by Elizabeth Heider, and it came out July 2nd. The cover on this one is spectacular. As soon as I saw it, I knew I had to read it. I am hoping that this is the beginning of a new series because I adored the book. I have not seen hardly anything about this one, which surprises me, especially with the Naples setting. Nikki Serafino is enjoying the sunset from her boat in her beloved port city of Naples, Italy, when she discovers the body of a man in the warm waters of the bay. An investigator working as the liaison between local police and American troops, Nikki is certainly no stranger to violence and organized crime. But this case grows complicated when the victim turns out to be a U.S. naval captain stationed at the nearby military base, and the autopsy reveals foul play. As she delves into the case, another body is found, and Nikki must face connections linking the murders to her complicated history as a daughter of Naples. The sense of place is very strong in this one. That reminds me a lot of Jane Harper, because I feel like you just read her books and you know you're dropped right into Australia, and that's how this book is with Naples. She really brings to life the culture, the people, the food, the mafia, the local organized crime, all of it. And it's just fascinating. She also focuses on how much more difficult Nikki's job is because she is a woman in a male-centric culture and in a male-centric job. The mystery is well-crafted and engaging, and I thought the inclusion of the U.S. military in the story was a fabulous addition. I learned a ton about how they operate in a foreign country. All the way around, I thought this one was outstanding, and I really hope there'll be another one. And it's May the Wolf Die by Elizabeth Heider.
That sounds like it's got a lot of layers to it, like really a smart mystery.
I agree with that completely.
Speaking of smart mysteries, I've got The Best Lies by David Ellis, and it came out July 23rd. This gripping page-turner follows Leo Balinoff, a pathological liar and Chicago attorney who finds himself accused of the murder of a crime boss. Leo is faced with the choice of working undercover for the FBI to take this drug dealer down or go to prison for murder. This thriller was, like I mentioned, smart and well-written, and it had me constantly questioning the characters' motives. The plot was so propulsive and really kept me off balance in the best way. For most of the story, we're left partially in the dark as to what is actually happening, which makes this series of slow reveals completely worth the payoff. the story does require a little bit of focus because there's a large cast of characters and there's a lot of time jumping, but it's a story really worth sticking with. I think that this is a thriller, Cindy, that would be right up your alley, and it's The Best Lies by David Ellis.
This is one that you have told me to read, and I just haven't had a chance to get to it yet, but it is definitely on my list.
I think it's going to be a good one for you.
I'm sure it is. You have a great track record in recommending thrillers to me.
Okay, hopefully I can keep it up.
Exactly. My next book is The Family Experiment by John Marrs, which came out July 9th. This is the first and only book that I've ever read by John Marrs, and I thought it was absolutely compelling and fascinating and so intriguing. I've always heard such great things about him and his books, and I was glad that I tried this one. When I read a book like this, set in the future, usually with some kind of technological component, I find myself in awe of an author who can create so much from his own imagination. It's interesting to see how authors interpret the potential future. Due to overcrowding and a financial crisis, an ever-increasing number of people cannot afford to start families. As an alternative, in the UK, a company has created virtual children to raise in the metaverse. To advertise his product, the company launches a reality TV show that follows 10 couples raising virtual children while competing to win the right to keep their virtual child or be given the money to raise a real baby. Mars's use of short chapters that frequently end with cliffhangers propels the story along, and his premise feels all too real. He also addresses our obsession with reality TV and its impact on society, as well as our mental health. This is an incredibly timely read, and the unique plotline kept me captivated. And that's The Family Experiment by John Marrs.
Oh, I didn't realize this was the first book of his that you have read. I thought this was great too. And if you're a millennial, I think many readers will resonate with The Sims. Are you familiar with The Sims, that computer game?
Just a little bit. I never played it, but I know what it is.
I grew up playing that game and I just could not stop thinking about The Sims as I was reading The Family Experiment.
I remembered that people loved his book, The One, and then maybe The Passenger, but I haven't read any others of his, but this one just sounded really intriguing, and it was.
I think if you liked this book, you'll like the other books of his that are set in this same world.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back at some point and pick them up.
Okay, next for me is Worst Case Scenario by TJ Newman. It came out August 13th. When I saw TJ had yet another airplane disaster book coming out, I was admittedly a bit skeptical. Just how much despair in the air can one really take? Like, she seems to have gotten herself into a niche here. But within the first chapter, it became clear that the plane was most certainly going down into a power plant, which is where the action really takes place. It's on the ground here. This high-octane thriller is heavy on plot, as a small town is tasked with saving the future of Earth from a nuclear meltdown. I love how TJ Newman zooms into the personal disasters of each of these characters, while also zooming out and giving us a bird's eye view of the broader implications for this catastrophe for the fate of humanity. Sensitive readers should take care with the first portion of the book, as depictions of the catastrophe are kind of gory and also oddly matter of fact. But as the story progressed, I became more emotionally invested in the characters. And then I think the goriness and kind of the grittiness of it all eased up a little bit. While Drowning remains my favorite book from Newman, this was a wild ride that held my attention from beginning to end. And that was Worst Case Scenario by TJ Newman.
I started this one, but the initial depiction of the deaths was so gruesome, I had to stop.
Yeah, it was really jarring. It seemed unnecessary, but yeah. That's my personal take.
But I think that people have been loving it. So I think if you just skim past that, which I have been better about doing, but I had just kind of worried. I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be like this the whole time. But it wasn't, it sounds like.
It wasn't. It became more character focused.
Which is good. And as you said, thankfully, not another plane disaster.
Yes. I'll be curious to see what she does next, because it's like, where do you go from here now? What are you going to do?
I agree.
The holidays are back at Starbucks, and there's so much to share. With classics like Caramel Brulee Latte, Peppermint Mocha, and Chestnut Praline Latte, we're celebrating everyone's flavor of festivity. Order yours in the app.
This episode is brought to you by Batiste Dry Shampoo. Whether you're on the go, at the gym, or getting ready for a night out, Batiste has a dry shampoo for you. Refresh with over 10 signature fragrances. Or try Batiste Hint of Color, a tinted dry shampoo that seamlessly blends with your hair. Need an extra boost? Try Batiste Dry Shampoo with added benefits, like volumizing, texturizing, and more. Buy Batiste now, in-store or online at your nearest retailer.
So my next book is The Faculty Lounge by Jennifer Mathieu, and it came out July 23rd. I feel like I'm never leaving July. High school teacher Jennifer Mathieu's adult debut is a timely and relevant glimpse at today's issues in schools and a tribute to educators. The story follows a large cast of teachers, administrators, and staff at the fictional Baldwin High School, a Texas high school that feels remarkably like the high school where Jennifer worked for years and which was close to where I lived in Houston. Infused with heart and hilarity, The Faculty Lounge addresses what it's like to teach at a high school in 2024. Helicopter parents commenting on curriculum choices and more, school shootings and lockdown drills, social media, book bannings, and much more. It definitely made me feel for the kids who have to endure all of these things. It is hard to be a teenager in 2024. I really enjoyed the format of The Faculty Lounge. Each chapter is told from the point of view of someone working at the school. It was a delight to see how their lives connected as the story unfolded. She initially wrote the book as a short story collection set at this fictional high school, but then her editor encouraged her to make it a novel versus short stories, which I thought made sense because as you read each person's story, you're like, oh, that's interesting. They do interweave, but also they are pretty separate. But I thought the format worked very well, and I liked hearing from all of the different individuals at the school, as well as seeing how they connected to each other. And that's The Faculty Lounge by Jennifer Mathieu.
I remember you really liking that one this summer, and it sounds so sweet.
It is. It's really interesting. And as I said, it's tough to see what these kids are having to go through, and particularly in high school. So it was interesting to see it all on the page.
Definitely. Okay, I'm going to go with the interesting theme here that is definitely a word to describe my next book. It's The Axeman's Carnival by Chidgey, and it came out August 13th. I had my doubts about finding a talking magpie endearing, and I hope you'll give this one a chance. Our story begins in rural New Zealand as Tama, the magpie, falls from his nest and he's rescued by Marnie, a woman trapped in an abusive marriage. Against all odds, Tama learns to speak with humans, and he becomes known as a clever, wisecracking magpie. We follow Tama as his heart is caught between two worlds: the magpie family in the wild, and his life of domesticity filled with human affection, but increasing danger. I absolutely adored Tama's big-hearted personality and his tender relationship with Marnie, his caregiver. The novel does have this steady sense of foreboding leading up to the event of the Axeman's Carnival, but Tama's antics really offered great comedic relief throughout. This is a unique, compulsive reading experience that explores the bonds of friendship, domestic violence, and the meaning of freedom. That was The Axeman's Carnival by Chidgey.
I haven't seen very much about that one at all.
It's published by Europa Editions, which is a small publisher, and I heard about it from a friend on Bookstagram, and she said it was really fantastic, and so I gave it a try, and I'm glad I did.
I have enjoyed a lot of books that they put out.
This book reminded me of Remarkably Bright Creatures, so I think if you liked that book, The Axeman's Carnival is going to be for you.
Okay, I may try to pick that up. I just love finding those off the beaten path books.
Yeah, this is definitely one of them.
So my next book is Maria by Michelle Moran, and it came out July 30th. For some reason, I was not sure about this one going in, but I ended up thinking it was fantastic. This story is historical fiction about the real-life Maria von Trapp. I knew next to nothing about her and was surprised to learn how much the movie varied from her actual life story and the family's story. I guess I should have known that because rarely does a movie depict people's lives exactly as they were. But for some reason, this really startled me because I've watched The Sound of Music so many times over the years, and I really thought that it more closely followed their story than it did. But oh well. This story of family loss and the difficult choices people sometimes have to make is a powerful reminder that the truth is usually more layered and nuanced than the stories brought to the screen in Hollywood. Moran's historical fiction tale follows the life of the Von Trapp family's complicated matriarch through a dual timeline narrative that follows Maria's life in Austria from her early years through meeting the Von Trapps and the creation of the Broadway musical several decades later, as Oscar Hammerstein works on the Broadway musical about the family. Readers will most likely be surprised to learn that Maria was the disciplinarian of the family, that she did not initially fall in love with Captain Von Trapp but married him for the kids, and that the family did not escape in the night over the Alps to freedom. The details about her early years, and how they informed her life, as well as how she unsuccessfully petitioned Hammerstein to alter aspects of the Broadway musical, are fascinating and kept me turning the pages. As a Broadway fan, I loved all of the aspects of the book that had to do with getting the show to the stage, what that was like, and the aspects of Hammerstein's life very late in his career. Moran includes an in-depth author's note about her research, as well as what happened to each Von Trapp family member after the debut of both the musical on Broadway and subsequently the movie. And that is Maria by Michelle Moran.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. I have never seen The Sound of Music. Can you believe it?
You haven't? Have we talked about this before?
I don't know. I'm not sure if you knew this about me. It just hasn't come my way. I don't know why, but maybe I should change that.
Oh, definitely. It's one of those movies that I grew up watching, and then my kids have loved it. We've all seen it 1,000 times. And I knew it didn't completely follow their life. So it's not like I was like, oh, wow, this tells every single aspect of their story. But I didn't realize how much the story was changed, which, again, as I said, was my naivete. When stories get transformed to a movie or to a musical or to a play, rarely do they keep a lot of elements of the person's life. But I still was very surprised.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Next for me is The Borrowed Life of Frederick Fife by Anna Johnston, and it came out September 10th. I absolutely adored this book. It will be a favorite of the year for me, and we are hosting Anna for Chapters and Chats on November 21st, so we can't wait to talk with her. This is a heartwarming book about a wild case of mistaken identity that allows a lonely old man to move into a nursing home and finally become part of a family. Anna Johnston based Frederick's big-hearted character on her own grandfather and the people that she met while working in the nursing home that he resided in. Through this story, you can really see the author's deep affection for people in their sunset years. It's just so evident. It's such a warm story. It feels like a hug and is really uplifting. That was The Borrowed Life of Frederick Fife by Anna Johnston.
And this goes in line with what we were talking about earlier, with more stories about people who are older and stories set in nursing homes.
Yes, exactly. This was one of those stories that is just really right up my alley this year.
I enjoyed that one as well. Okay, my next book is Elizabeth of Easthampton by Audrey Belleza and Emily Harding, and it came out August 6th. I finally have left July. Pride and Prejudice is one of my all-time favorite books. I just absolutely love it. I reread it. It's one of the only books that I've ever reread, and I reread it, I would say probably every other year, every third year. And I enjoy checking out retellings because I like to see how they interpret the book and the characters, how they update the story, and what they do with it. The funny thing is, while I do love retellings, I don't really love the stories that try to be sequels to Pride and Prejudice or Persuasion, that try to take the story and keep going. I just seem to really enjoy the retellings. So Jane Austen's retellings are all the rage. I feel like they're everywhere. And Elizabeth of Easthampton is one of the best that I have read in a while. It is an engaging and refreshing take on Pride and Prejudice that demonstrates why Austen's stories still resonate with readers today. The authors do a wonderful job of loosely following the original, but they also modernize the story and add some of their own elements as well. I highly recommend this book to anyone looking for a fabulously crafted retelling and an engaging romance. It has a fun summer setting because it obviously came out in the summer, but I think you could read it year-round, especially if you're going on vacation or you're wanting something when the weather's really cold that kind of takes you to the beach or what. But I thought it was very well done. And for those who like to know, there is some steam in this one. I treat steam these days like I treat violence. I just try to skim over it and keep going, but people do seem to like to know. I need to go back and read the first retelling that they did, which was called Emma of 83rd Street, about Emma. I interviewed them for the podcast. The other thing that I think seems to be a growing trend is authors writing together, two people coming together and creating a story. And I just find that so fascinating. Like trying to sit down together and write a book. I mean, it'd be hard enough to write your own book, let alone write together. So I enjoyed interviewing them, finding out about how they approach writing together and how they approach conflicts when they are going in different directions about the characters or the storyline. And that's Elizabeth of Easthampton by Audrey Belleza and Emily Harding.
So here's a hypothetical question. If somebody has not read anything by Jane Austen or Pride and Prejudice, would they need to know about the story to enjoy this book before going into it?
That's a great question. And I don't think I've ever really thought about that when I'm reading retellings. I don't think so at all. I think you would just enjoy the story as it is. And I think those that have read Pride and Prejudice or Emma or Persuasion, whichever the one it is that it's a modern retelling of, will just get all the little Easter eggs that are thrown in or understand okay, this is this character in the original story. This is that character. This is staying the same. This is diverging. But I think they definitely stand alone.
Okay, that's good to know. I've never read Jane Austen either. I feel like just like a cultural moment for me where I got to add these things to my list next to The Sound of Music.
Yes, and Pride and Prejudice is long. So if you are not a fan of longer books, you may be like, okay, this book is long. And the other thing that happens with Pride and Prejudice is that there are 5 sisters, and the main sister, who's the second sister, Elizabeth, but also there's a whole storyline with her older sister, with her youngest sister. So there's a lot that happens in that book. And most of the time, not all of that translates to the retellings just because it's a lot. There's a lot of characters, a lot happening. Have you ever watched any of the Jane Austen movies?
No.
Okay.
Just nothing. No background.
You just skipped all that altogether.
I guess so.
Had you read Little Women before you read Hello, Beautiful?
Nope.
Okay. And did you find that was an issue?
No.
Yeah. I think this would be the same. I mean, Hello, Beautiful is more inspired by Little Women than it is a retelling of it. The 4 sisters and the William, Laurie's character. But I feel like most of these retellings do follow the story closer, but they all diverge and, put their own mark on it.
Okay, that's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Next for me is Exposure by Ava Dellaira, and this came out September 10th. This book's power lies in the questions that it raises, which I think makes it the absolute perfect book club selection. The story follows Noah, a Black high school senior, and Juliet, a white college freshman. They have a night together that changes the course of their lives, but they each have conflicting perceptions about what happened with this same event. I think the author skillfully interrogates readers with these pointed questions. What happens when 2 people have valid yet conflicting stories about a shared experience? Can absolution or true redemption exist if the victim will never see justice? What does justice even look like 20 years later? This book will be a win for readers who like thought-provoking stories and are willing to take a nuanced approach to cancel culture, race, and consent. That was Exposure by Ava Dellaira.
I have wondered so much about this one. It sounds like a very thought-provoking read.
It is. It's one of those books where you know that the author is just trying to get at some issues and questions, and I think she does that so well.
Good. So my next book is The Lightning Bottles by Marissa Stapley, which came out September 24th. I am a huge music fan, and I am all here for the great stories that involve musicians and musical genres. There have been some great books about music in the 1970s, but I feel like you don't see nearly as much fiction about the grunge era of the 1990s, of which I am a fan, so that made this a great read for me. This unique and compelling book follows Jane Pryor, the former lead singer of the Lightning Bottles, one of the most popular duos of the 1990s, as she seeks to discover what happened to Elijah, her husband and the other half of the Lightning Bottles. He disappeared years before. Jane and Elijah shared a deep bond and were both extremely talented, but the pressures of stardom and the music industry caused them to crash spectacularly. When Jane rents a house in rural Germany, she encounters a teenage mega fan who believes that Elijah is still alive, and the pair set out to find him. In a cleverly crafted manner, the duo follow clues left in artwork to attempt to locate Elijah. Readers who grew up in this era will revel in the nostalgia as they read this book, which references maps, call-in shows and countdowns, Walkmans, and music trivia and details from the time period. The Lightning Bottles takes readers on a memorable journey, connecting the past and present through flashbacks, explaining how Jane and Elijah met, describing their highs and lows, and what led to both their meteoric rise to fame and subsequent crash. I just love this book so much. I will say there is a decent amount of drug use, and I just interviewed Marissa recently, and she and I had this big conversation about it. When people are reading these music stories that are set in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but really the 70s and the 90s particularly, because there was so much drug use. How did you handle writing about that? So we had this long conversation about it, which was really interesting. As I said, it just kind of takes me back when people are surprised that there is drug use in these books, because I don't think you could write a book like this without drug use, or it would not be authentic at all. And that is The Lightning Bottles by Marissa Stapley.
That's interesting that you bring that point up because, yeah, without that drug use component, it would seem really like something was missing.
Yes. And she said she spent a long time trying to figure out how to deal with it. And in one version, she had pulled it out and her editor was like, what happened here? And she's like, you have to include that because if not, you're not telling the same story and you're not telling an authentic story from this time period. And I just remember that some people complained about the drug use in Daisy Jones. And I'm like, but they were all doing drugs. Like that's part of it. And so maybe if you don't like that part, maybe those aren't the stories for you kind of thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. I can see that. Yep. Next up is the Sing Sing Files, 1 journalist, 6 innocent men, and a 20-year fight for justice by Dan Slepian, and it came out September 10th. This book is for any reader moved by Just Mercy and Brian Stevenson's work with the Innocence Project, or was invested in the infamous Oprah's book club pick, The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton. Dan Slepian is a journalist at Dateline NBC, and he began working with wrongfully convicted individuals decades ago, mostly as a side project. Sing Sing refers to a prison in New York City where Dan was introduced to multiple wrongfully convicted men. This book primarily follows JJ, who really began Dan's interest in this type of work, but the book also shares the story of other men that Dan came in contact with within Sing Sing through JJ's story. Through these men's stories, Dan captures the helplessness and gross injustice of wrongful convictions. Readers are left to wonder, how could this possibly happen? And how could this happen over and over again? I highly recommend the audiobook format. The audiobook was so immersive and it felt like I was watching a captivating episode of Dateline. And it also includes portions narrated by the actual men impacted, reading various letters that they had written. It's really investigative journalism at its finest. We are so thrilled to host Dan as well as JJ in January for Chapters and Chats. That was the Sing Sing Files, 1 journalist, 6 innocent men, and a 20-year fight for justice by Dan Slepian.
That one is definitely on my list.
I think that you would find it so compelling, especially on audio.
Yes, I have been finding that nonfiction is working really well for me on audio.
Yeah, I think that the audio production value of this one especially, you would really appreciate.
Okay, good. I will add it to my list for nonfiction November.
Okay.
So my next book is The Lantern of Lost Memories by Sanaka Hiiragi, which came out September 7th. This book just recently showed up here. I had heard nothing about it. I hadn't seen it anywhere. And all of a sudden it was here. And I have decided after Juliet Willoughby that I'm going to try these books because it works so well. And so did this one. When I read the summary, I was intrigued. I sat down that day and I read it. It is so short, it can easily be read in one sitting. All of these magical stories translated from the Japanese are having a moment right now, and I am here for it. This one reminds me a bit of Before the Coffee Gets Cold series, which I adore. The main character is Mr. Hirasaka, who operates a magical photo studio where people visit after they die to view key moments about their lives and also to select the montage of photos they will experience as they pass on to the next world. His studio allows them to relive one precious memory before passing into the afterlife. The story follows 3 vastly different visitors, an old woman who embraced life to the fullest, a middle-aged man burdened by his troubled past, and a young child with a pure, untarnished outlook on life. And I will say, the third storyline is much grimmer than I expected it to be. When you were talking about child abuse earlier, it's not sexual abuse, but there is still abuse of a child, and it was a little hard to read that part of it. I do not want to spoil the incredible ending, but I did love the focus on showing that every decision, no matter how small, ripples outward to affect others in ways that we will never fully understand or know. I enjoyed how well the story was able to show the interconnection between the lives, reminding readers that we are all bound by the choices we make, often in ways we can't see. The ending is particularly touching and unexpected for me, and I just loved it. I love stories that focus on our place in the world and reflect on the small impacts we leave on the lives we touch, even in passing. The world needs more kindness right now, and I love stories that encourage that. And this is The Lantern of Lost Memories by Sanaka Hiiragi.
That sounds so good. I think it would make a fun book club discussion as well, because you could go around and talk about your own memory. Like, what would be the one memory that you would pick to relive? I think that would be such a fun discussion.
I agree. And it's just so clever, the whole story. Like, This delivery person shows up to Mr. Hirasaka's door each time somebody new's arriving. Depending on the age of the person, depends on how many boxes of photos they have. Photos from every aspect of life. You have to go through year by year, pick one photo from each year. So it is a very reflective book.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, it is great.
The last book for me is The Small and the Mighty by Sharon McMahon. This came out September 24th. You may know Sharon from her Instagram presence as America's government teacher at Sharon Says So. But this is her first book, and it's a collection of remarkable short stories of people throughout history that changed the course of America, but are really these unsung heroes, people that you're not going to find anywhere in a textbook. One of the quotes from her book really stuck with me. Sharon writes, "Sometimes the quietest voices leave the loudest echoes." And that's really the essence of this book, those quiet voices with the loudest echoes. The audiobook is narrated by Sharon, and this book just felt like a balm for my soul in a really charged political environment that we're in. I know that people probably don't want to talk about politics. That's the last thing, that people want to engage in right now. But this book is not political in the sense that it's like one side or the other. This serves as a reminder of our collective history as a nation and that every voice matters. And I think that you'll find it's really uplifting and inspiring. What's interesting to me is that oftentimes my favorite historical fiction books are based on the true story of unsung heroes, particularly women. And I felt like every woman featured in Sharon's book could have their own riveting novel. That was The Small and the Mighty by Sharon McMahon.
I really enjoyed that one as well. I listened to it, and you mentioned she narrates it. She's very enthusiastic at times, so I was kind of like, okay. But I did really enjoy it. The other issue I found a little bit with the audiobook is that she does jump around some. So all of a sudden she'd be talking about somebody from like earlier chapters, or she'd return to somebody and I have to be like, who is that again? So I think I might have done better if I read it, but I did really like it. And I picked it as a December Buzz Reads pick.
Oh, good. I hope that people will find just encouragement in that book. It's wonderful.
I agree. And my last book is The Fabled Earth by Kimberly Brock. And this is the other October book. It came out October 1st. So I am always fascinated with these incredibly wealthy families in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who built these magnificent, gargantuan homes and then only used them for short periods of time. So much changed with World War I, the introduction of the income tax. So a variety of things happened that caused this effect. But it is just so interesting to me that there was enough wealth that these people built these homes and then, 40, 50 years later, they could not sustain them. So this has to do with the Carnegies, and it's not Andrew, but it's his brother Thomas. And their family built a group of mansions on Cumberland Island off the Georgia coast. So The Fabled Earth is a beautifully crafted, character-driven tale of friendship, family drama, mystery, and folklore set in and around Cumberland Island, Georgia. That's the remote island where JFK Jr. and Carolyn Brissett were married, actually at one of the Carnegie homes that's still standing. In the first half of the 1900s, the Carnegie family built several mansions on Cumberland as retreats, which they subsequently abandoned after several decades. This dual timeline story toggles between 1932 and the opulence of the Carnegie family's time spent at these grand mansions and 1959 in a small coastal Georgia town near Cumberland, where people are grappling with integration, the Korean War, and misogyny. Both time periods are well crafted and engaging, and Brock does a wonderful job of transporting the reader to another time and place. The marsh and the island come alive with her vivid descriptions. The sense of place in this one is incredibly strong. Readers who love learning about new places and earlier time periods will really love this one. It is a slow burn and it is character-driven, but it's just so beautiful. And that's The Fabled Earth by Kimberly Brock.
I think that this one sounds especially great. It reminds me of Mackinac Island, which is an island in Michigan that we love because there are these huge, opulent, old homes that nobody ever uses, and very interesting time period.
Yes, it's just crazy to think about. And here, particularly, a great comparison with Andrew, who spent so much money funding all of these libraries and the other things that he put his money toward, versus his brother, who just built all these large mansions, one of which burned down very quickly, another which is crumbling, a third which is now a hotel. So yes, it is interesting.
Huh. Very good. I love that cover too, The Fabled Earth. It's beautiful.
I do too. I was going to mention that as well. It's been a good grouping of covers.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Well, good. Well, Kelly, thanks as always for joining me. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to start rounding up our favorite books of the year.
I know. I'm so excited for that. And it's always tricky to figure out exactly what number we're going to be at for our best books of the year.
It is. And it's even trickier for me to pick my favorite book of the year. This year, not so much. I'll be curious to see if you land on 1 or 6.
Yes, exactly. I know. The pressure.
The pressure. Yes. Well, I can't wait to chat.
Me too.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up?
I'm a grown-up.
Me too.
Yep, me too. But these days being a grown-up can really suck.
Luckily, we're grown-ups who grew up in the coolest generation.
We had video arcades.
And also some of the best TV and movies ever made.
We lived the origin of awesome consumer electronics. The list goes on and on.
Yep, Generation X.
Exactly.
And we're Gen X grown-up.
Every week, the Gen X Grown Up podcast explores media, tech, toys, games, and more from both yesterday and today.
Through the eyes of Generation Xers who absolutely love that stuff. You can find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
Or find us on our website, genxgrownup.com.
Life sucks as a grown-up.
All right, you think that was good enough?
I hope so, man. I'm tired.
Who listens to a promo on a podcast and then goes and listens to a different podcast?
Right.
I've never done it.
Right.
I'm Allison Holland, host of the Kennedy Dynasty podcast. Equipped with a microphone and a long-term fascination of the Kennedy family, I am joined by an incredible cast of experts, friends, and guests to take you on a fun, relaxed, yet informative journey through history and pop culture. From book references to fashion to philanthropy to our modern expectations of the presidency itself, you'll see that there is so much more to Kennedy than just JFK or conspiracy theories. Join me for the Kennedy Dynasty podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I would love to connect with you on Instagram or Facebook, where you can find me at Thoughts from a Page. If you enjoy the show and have a moment to rate it or subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts, I would really appreciate it. It makes a huge difference. And please tell all of your friends about Thoughts from a Page. Word of mouth does wonders to help the show grow. I hope you'll tune in next time.
Hi there, I'm Heather Drago.
And I'm Sarah Saunders.
We host the podcast, That's a Hard No, about saying no and setting boundaries.
So you can become that true and empowered you that this world needs. Saying no isn't just okay.
It's the key to living an authentic, fulfilling life.
I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. So while this podcast is in no way a replacement for one-on-one therapy, I suppose I know what I'm talking about.
I'd say so. We talk about learning to say no and set healthy boundaries and how it impacts mental health, physical health, relationships, parenthood, and more.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website, hardnopodcast.com.
We're here to help you find your no and say it unapologetically.
That's a hard no.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not, it's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.